Gentlemen, let's turn to guns, which is another big issue you're going to be talking about this week in the Senate. Senator Cornyn, you met with families of the Newtown victims this week, and after meeting with them, you said that they wanted mental health reform first. But Francine Wheeler, the mother of one of the young children who was killed at Newtown, delivered the president's weekly radio address or media address this week. Here's what she said.
Our younger son, Ben, age 6, was murdered in his first grade classroom on December 14th, exactly 4 months ago this weekend. Please help us do something before our tragedy becomes your tragedy.
Senator, in that message, the only thing she mentioned was tougher gun control.
Well, I think in my meeting with the Sandy Hook families, they told me that, and of course, you know, who wouldn't have sympathy and empathy for these people who've suffered a terrible loss? But what they told me is they wanted to make sure their loved one did not die in vain, that something good would come out of this. And so I think that's why I'm focused like a laser on the mental health component.
But forgive me, sir, they're focused on tougher gun control, specifically the background check.
Well, for example, Adam Lanza stole his mother's guns. A background check wouldn't have stopped that problem, that incident. A background check should have stopped James Holmes in Tucson. It should have stopped the Virginia Tech shooter because their background check information about his adjudicated mental illness was not forwarded to the FBI's background check. In other words, I think the mental illness issue is the common element that we ought to be focused on, and I think we can do some good things. But I'm not for symbolism over substance. I think we can't just pat ourselves on the back and say we're going to pass some enhanced penalties for trafficking or other issues or background checks when they don't really go to solve the problems that cause these terrible tragedies.
Senator Durbin, you and Senator Cornyn, as we said in the lead-in, as the whips in the Senate, are the vote counters. You're the guys who know whether or not there are enough votes. Are there enough votes when this comes up this week for you to pass the Manchin-Toomey compromise on expanded background checks?
Well, Chris, I think John will concede that Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania is one of the most conservative members of the Republican Senate caucus. Joe Manchin, one of the most conservative members of the Democratic caucus. The two of them have come up with a background proposal that is supported by 90% of the people in America. It's supported by 75% of the members of the National Rifle Association. So I hope that the 16 senators and even more will step up and join this approach to make sure that the background checks extend beyond where they are today to try to reach the 40% of firearms that are being sold without a background check.
But, sir, do you have the votes at this moment or not?
We haven't whipped it. I can tell you this. When it gets down to it, we've got to ask the basic question. Should we try to keep guns out of the hands of felons and people so mentally unstable they shouldn't own a firearm? If the answer is yes, Manchin-Toomey is a step in that direction.
Real quickly, Senator Cornyn, do you have the votes? Lock it.
Well, I'm interested in the debate and discussion, but I would just make the point that if Manchin-Toomey were the law of the land today, none of the 4 of the most recent mass tragedies involving gun violence would have been prevented.
What the parents say that doesn't matter to them.
Well, what matters to me is that we not just engage in a symbolic act and pat ourselves on the back and say we've done something good and the problem unsolved. I'd like to try to solve the problem by focusing on the common element of these recent tragedies, which is the mental health issue.
This has been a Sunfish production.